Sometimes it takes walking away from everything to understand what everything was for. Not the awards, not the recognition, not the extraordinary experiences. The ordinary things. The ones so simple and so constant that they barely registered as valuable while they were there. Marlon Brando was, by most accounts, the most influential film actor of the 20th century. He changed what acting meant in America, brought to the screen a quality of presence and psychological reality that had not existed before him, and that transformed what audiences were willing to accept as true in performance. The early roles, Stanley Kowalski, the young rebel, the aging patriarch, these became reference points not just for actors, but for anyone interested in what it means to convey genuine human experience. His influence spread so widely and went so deep that actors who had never studied him were shaped by people who were shaped by people who had. He had, in the most literal sense, changed the art form. And he knew it. That was not something that required modesty to deny, because it was simply true, and Brando was, underneath everything, a man who cared about what was real. But knowing it didn't seem to give him what he had expected it to give him. The recognition, the awards, the status as the defining figure of a whole generation of actors, these arrived, and they were real, and then they were just there. Part of the landscape, not a source of the warmth or satisfaction that he might have imagined they would be back before he had them. He spent the later decades of his life in a place that could not have been more different from the Hollywood he had conquered. Tetiaroa, a small, remote atoll in French Polynesia, far from the studios and the industry and the culture of recognition that had defined his professional life. He had bought it in the early 1960s while filming Mutiny on the Bounty in Tahiti, and he returned to it across the following decades with increasing frequency and increasing relief. The island was everything the film world was not. Simple. Quiet. Without mirrors, in the sense of audiences or cameras or anyone paying attention to who he was. In his conversations in those later years, he talked about what he valued on the island in ways that surprised people who expected a man of his stature to speak of larger things. The quality of light in the afternoon, the sound of the water, the particular pleasure of a meal that was simple and fresh and eaten outdoors without formality, the absence of the need to perform, not on screen, but in the constant low-level performance that any public life requires. The management of how you are perceived, the energy spent on being recognized. He said the absence of all that was one of the greatest reliefs of his life, and that what he had missed, without fully knowing he was missing it, was the ordinary. The ordinary afternoon. The meal eaten slowly. The conversation with someone who was not interested in his name or his reputation, but simply in what he had to say. The morning where nothing was required of him that had to do with being Marlon Brando. These things, he said, were what he had most wanted and least known how to keep. Maybe that resonates with something in your own life. Maybe there has been a time when you were so focused on the thing you were pursuing, the goal, the achievement, the next version of the life you were working toward, that the ordinary pleasures of the life you were already living receded into the background without you quite noticing. Not lost, exactly. Just not fully seen. Not fully received. Present in a kind of theoretical way, you knew they were there, but not actually tasted, actually rested in, actually allowed to be the thing they were. Marlon Brando found, on a small island far from the world that knew his name, that what he had most valued all along was available everywhere. That it had been available in Los Angeles, in New York, in whatever city the film was shooting. He had just not been able to see it there because the noise, the attention, the expectations, the constant low hum of professional life had made the quieter things invisible. It took the island to teach him what the ordinary was worth, and then he could look back and see how much of it he had walked through without fully knowing what he was walking through. Here's what that observation offers, gently. You don't have to go to a remote island to learn what the ordinary is worth. You can learn it here, in whatever the texture of your ordinary afternoon actually is. In whatever is already present in the life you have, the familiar rooms, the usual sounds, the people and places and small pleasures that constitute your particular ordinary. Those things are worth receiving, and you can receive them now without the distance of an island or the contrast of having left everything behind. You can simply choose to notice them with the kind of attention that makes them real. What Brando described in various conversations across his later years was something that sounds simple but is harder to practice than it sounds. It was the ability to let a moment be just what it was, not a platform for something else. Not a means to an end. Not something to be managed or photographed or used. Just an afternoon. Just a meal. Just the sound of water, which was what it was and needed nothing from him. He found in that island simplicity a quality of presence in ordinary experience that he said was the most valuable thing he had. More valuable than the Oscars? That was the question people would ask. And he would say yes, without apparent irony. The Oscars were real, and so was what they represented, the recognition by his peers, the confirmation of the work's quality, the formal acknowledgement of something genuinely achieved. He didn't pretend those things didn't matter. They had mattered, and they still mattered. But what he could be grateful for in a way that actually sustained him day after day in the ordinary texture of living was something the Oscars couldn't provide, and what the island afternoon could. Maybe that distinction is worth sitting with. The difference between the things you have achieved and can be proud of, the real achievements, the things that represent genuine effort and deserve genuine recognition, and the things that actually sustain you on an ordinary Tuesday. Those two lists are not always the same. And the things on the second list, the sustaining things, the ones that actually make the texture of a day livable, deserve more deliberate attention than they often receive. What is on that second list for you? What is already present in your ordinary life today, in the life you're currently living, that sustains you in the way an island afternoon sustained Marlon Brando? What, if it were gone tomorrow, would leave a specific gap that none of your achievements could fill? And when did you last actually receive it? Not just have it, but notice it. Take it in. Let it be the thing it is. That is the gratitude worth cultivating. Not the gratitude that is really pride. The gratitude for achievement that is actually just satisfaction in having done well. But the simpler kind. The gratitude for the afternoon that doesn't require anything of you. For the meal that is just food and company and the pleasure of both. For the sounds that are just sounds and the light that is just light. That kind of gratitude is available every day. Marlon Brando had to go a very long way to find it. You may not have to go anywhere at all. So take a slow breath and let the ordinary afternoon in front of you be worth your attention. Not as something to be photographed or recorded or shared, just experienced, just received, just allowed to be what it is, which is, if you look at it clearly, quite a lot. That is the gratitude Marlon Brando found on his island. And it is available to you right now, wherever you are. And one final thing worth naming about gratitude and ordinariness. The gratitude that comes from seeing the ordinary clearly tends to change the quality of relationship with the people around you. Because when you start noticing that the ordinary afternoon is valuable, the meal, the light, the familiar sounds, you also start noticing that the people who are present in those ordinary moments are valuable in the same way. Not because of what they have achieved or what they represent, but because they are there. Because the ordinary afternoon shared is something different from the ordinary afternoon alone, and something better. Marlon Brando valued his time on the island partly for the solitude, but also for the quality of company it allowed. The people who came there weren't coming because of his fame. They were coming because of him. And that distinction, which had been nearly impossible to maintain in Hollywood, was available there. The company was real. And it made the ordinary afternoon more ordinary in the best way, more human, more simple, more genuinely received. Maybe there are people in your life who are available for that kind of company, who would share an ordinary afternoon with you, without agenda, without performance, just present. And maybe making space for that, inviting it, creating the conditions for it, is worth doing this week. Not a grand occasion, just an ordinary afternoon shared with someone who matters. That is what Brando found to be worth more than any award. And it is available to you today if you choose to receive it.